Hello, everyone. My name is Jesus, and welcome to the first episode of The Road to Old School MTG. The purpose of this channel will be uh, to inform anybody interested in the old school Magic the Gathering format and walking you through the full process of research, um, purchasing cards, and finding games where you can play and your deck that you created. So first, I'm going to explain just a little history about me and the game of Magic, explaining my decision to go into old school, the old school format. I'll be then talking about the different formats within old school as well. So first of all, just me and my history with Magic. I started Magic around the year 1994, 95, so around middle school, and I kept on playing it into all throughout high school as well. But I was just a kid. I didn't have much money during those times, so I didn't buy many cards. I wish I had because nowadays cards from Alphabet Unlimited Revised, those are extremely expensive, right? So I missed out on that. Where I really got into it was starting from the Ice Age set, which is, although it's very old, it's not very expensive in terms of the value of the cards. But that's around where I really got into it. I was playing a lot all throughout high school as well. But once I graduated, I lost just that, those friendships and that community that I played. And this is the day before and days before the internet, right? It's just that wasn't easy to find uh, people to play with. So and then I went off to college, so that I kind of lost contact with the game. But every now and then, if I always remembered it fondly. Uh, if I was just randomly in a store and I saw some Magic packs being sold, I would like purchase a couple just even though I had no intention of playing. Right? It was more just for that nostalgia, to relive those days and kind of see where the game's going. Just that vibe, right? So, um, and every now and then, throughout the years, I will dabble back and forth. I played some online stuff as well, unofficial formats, official formats, but it will be in and out. More recently, the last couple years, I what got me back strongly into Magic was the creation of Magic Arena. Right, so it made it very convenient to play to play against players. I like the just the whole program itself that it controls all the actions for you. Right, you just do what you want, and then everything is calculated on your behalf. Right, so just makes it easier to play. But now going into the reason why I'm like falling away from that and going into old school, um, I am I've become disillusioned with just the direction of the current Magic game. Uh, right, so there's a lot of other intellectual properties coming in. It just feels forced. Dungeons and Dragons, Godzilla, Walking Dead, all these, you know, different variations that have nothing to do with magic. Now not also the all different foils, different versions, alternate arts, all these things is just it's jumped the shark a long time ago, right? So I kind of ignored all that because I still love the game, but that's pushed me more and more away to the point where I stopped playing completely Magic Arena, even though I had a pretty decent collection of cards, digital cards. I 100% stopped playing that game from that platform. But then that just took me back to for me to remember the old days, right? And that's where old school Magic, my interest comes from, right? Just reliving those nostalgic moments. That's really important for me, especially just reliving those special moments from my childhood that I really enjoyed, and not just in Magic, but as you'll see in other things as well. But uh, just all those extra extravagant things that Magic is leading towards now, uh, just it's leading me into just the realization of how much I appreciate how it used to be, and the original Magic, right? The days of mana burn, the days of not knowing ahead of time what were going to be in cards and things like that. Uh, so uh, I want to recreate you know, those emotions that I had within me, those experiences, and right. So especially now, me later on in life, it's it's become more important for me to kind of go back to my roots and just relive those moments. And just so you see, you know, for me, the importance nostalgia plays in my life. Let me show you something not Magic related. So in middle school and high school, I was into music, guitar specifically. And I remember around right when I was graduating, about to graduate high school, I just walked randomly into this guitar store, Sam Ash in New York. Um, and I remember I played this guitar that blew me away. And all these years, 20 plus years, I remember the brand, the the style of guitar. Uh, it was I played a Fender Big Apple Strat from the late '90s in red, and that's and back then I had no money, right? I was just high school age, definitely not enough to pay buy a guitar like that. But all these years, uh, over 20 years later, I still remember all those details. I remember how I felt, and um, feeling sorry that in the time I couldn't afford it, right? But now, many years later, I have disposable income. I still remember that. So I was finally, not even a year ago, was able to get myself a Fender Big Apple Strat from the late '90s, right? Because this was discontinued soon after uh, uh, the year 2000 hit. So this particular guitar is like 20 years old. Around that same time frame, I would have gotten it. So you guys just see the importance that nostalgia plays in my life, not just in Magic, but just in general. Just recreating those special memories that I had from before. And so you see in my interest in old school, right? So now let me explain what old school is, just in general, and then I go more in depth in terms of the different formats, right? So old school Magic is a way of playing Magic that only the first few sets of the game are allowed to be played, right? So the original sets. Uh, Old school Magic is known a lot also as 93/94, right? The first 2 years of the game, 1993, 1994. That gives you an idea of what sets are allowed in old school Magic. There are other formats that allow 95 as well, and I think even later also. But that's depending on the group that you join and so forth, right? But in general, old school tends to be 93, 94, those 2 years. So, uh, me looking back at my collection, right, because I still have my magic cards, right, but a lot of cards, but not a lot of value, right? So, just going through some of these cards, I was finding some of the lands, thinking about what I could create. Um, but uh, uh, a lot of the cards are not legal in the old school format, right? And the cards that I do have that are legal, like they're not very interesting, right? I have mainly inexpensive cards that So basically, I'm starting from scratch here, which is I think is good also because for any of you that are also starting from scratch, or maybe you might have one or two rungs up the ladder in terms of experience, but you still haven't gone full in on old school, you can follow along with me in terms of the full process of me learning more about old school Magic, researching it, deciding what deck or decks I'm going to choose, and then actually going out and purchasing the cards, and creating the decks, and then hopefully playing them, whether in person after COVID, hopefully, or nowadays online through Zoom. That's also a very common option, right? So that's what, in general, old school Magic is. The first 2 years of the sets of the game is what's allowable, but there are variations, and that's what I'm going to explain right now. And also, I'm going to show just some of the resources that I've learned about through my research. So the first resource I want to highlight here is this website called mtgpics.com. So the nice thing about this is that it shows the actual pictures of the cards scanned, so you see the actual images of the cards, but it's also in chronological order, right? So if you go to the very last tab, right, that means the furthest away set, that's where we want to be. And then right here and on the side is very handy. It gives you the date of printing. Um, so there we go. Alpha was first introduced in August 5, 1993, and so forth. You go through on Beta Unlimited, Arabian Nights, Antiquities Revised, Legends, Summer Magic Revised, just not revised. The Dark, Falling Empires will be the last in 1994. So that's the 2 years allowed, 93, 94. However, not all formats allow Falling Empires for one reason or another. I'm not sure why. If anybody in the comments has that information, I would like to know. But I'm sure a lot of you would like as well, right? But and that's where me explaining the different formats will come into play to just give the nuances of what is allowed, what isn't allowed, and so forth. Okay, but in general, this is what old school Magic is. The first 2 years of sets are allowed, and some reprints are allowed also, but we'll get to that right now. So the three main ways of playing, the three main formats of old school are Swedish, Eternal Central, and Atlantic. There are other ones as well, but those are the main ones that I think I've noticed. But definitely in the comments you can post if there's other ones as well. They're very similar, but there are some strong differences as well that has to be considered. So first, Swedish. Let's look at that one. So the sets allowed. So this website here, Old School MTG Blogspot, is a nice resource for Swedish. These are the sets allowed in this version: Alpha, Beta Unlimited, Arabian Nights, Antiquities, Legends, Dark. If you notice, there's no revised and no Falling Empires. So revised is technically the first reprint set. Looking, right, having this resource here, Alpha Beta Unlimited, from my understanding, all these three are basically the first set, right? These are just different waves of the first initial set. They're all within 1993, you see. Right, so um, they all count as one, right? But um, they have differences in terms of the printing process, right? So that's how you can tell them apart, and then that difference makes their value in terms of money very different as well, right? But you can consider them all just the same set, basically, just different waves of printing. Uh, so then Arabian Nights would be the first expansion set, right? A brand new set to expand upon the original. Then Antiquities. So Revised is just a reprint set. It reprints some of the cards from the first initial Alpha Beta Unlimited. It reprints them, right? Not all of them. It took out the most powerful ones, right? That basically this revised means after revision, after consideration, they noticed some cards were way overpowered. They eliminated those cards and they were not reprinted again. Okay, so Swedish does not allow for reprints, so that's why revised is not allowed. You only have to have cards from the original sets. So Alpha Beta Unlimited, Antiquities, Arabian Nights, Legends, and the Dark. You have to have, if you want to play in Swedish, those are the only cards from those sets that you're allowed. Revised not allowed, Fallen Empire is not allowed, and anything after that, fourth edition, anything else, any other reprints not allowed. You have to have the original from these sets on, right? So that's why I will be, for the most part, staying away from Swedish because it's cost prohibitive to me. Although I want to join old school, right? I want to keep it within reason. I think most people interested in old school would 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 agree with that idea, right? So that's probably why the reason why most people would not uh, actually delve into old school, just because of the cost associated with even even thinking about joining, right? So uh, I'm I will be staying away from Swedish in general. Some different play groups may allow reprints and so forth, right? So it depends. But as the rules state, in general, they're not, reprints are not allowed, so it's extremely expensive to be uh, to participate in Swedish. Here on this, you'll see the restricted and banned list. For the banned cards, these are pretty much the same across all old school. Anything that has ante, right? That was a betting mechanism back in the day. Any cards related to ante are banned. You cannot play with them. But those cards tended to be very not very good anyway, right? So there's not much loss there. But this is the restricted list for Swedish, and this is in general very similar across all the different old schools. Uh, there's some minor ones, different ones are not restricted in different ones, right? So we'll talk about that as well. Um, but it makes sense if you know your history in Magic, these being restricted. Um, okay, and then just down here gives you more information on more formats within the Swedish um, um, the major Swedish format. But that gives you an idea of Swedish here. Now, for me, I plan participating in the other two major formats, Eternal Central and Atlantic, because they allow for reprint cards. So that makes it a lot more attainable for most people to join in old school Magic, and I'll explain why here. So first, Eternal Central. So going to eternalcentral.com, uh, gives you the rules of Eternal Central. So it's basically the same as Swedish 93, 94, right? Those are 2 years. The main difference here is that they allow for reprinted cards to be used. So also another, uh, this one allows Falling Empires, right? So this one allows a new set, Falling Empires, to be used. But the big thing I think is it allows not only Revise to be used, but any cards also after Revise, so any card from the year 1985 onwards that follow uh, these two rules to be legal within Eternal Central and Atlantic. Any cards that are reprint cards, right? Reprint cards is just cards that are printed again because people missed out on them from before, right? So to have them uh, be available again. So that's what basically what reprint cards are. That's what revised is, a whole set of just all those cards reprinted again, except for the most powerful ones. They were not reprinted because Magic wanted to phase those out, right? So that's what reprint sets are. So you can have cards that are reprinted as long as these two rules are followed. It has to have the original artwork from the original set it was first printed on, and it has to have the original card frame from the first set it was printed on, right? So basically, it has to look like a cards from Alpha Beta Unlimited, Arabian Nights, Antiquities, Legends of the Dark, Falling Empires, right? It has to have the look of it. So for my research and from this handy resource here, mtgpigs.com, we can kind of take a look at that right now. So alpha cards, right? Black border, alpha and beta, the black border. But if you look at the art, the card itself, right? This is what the art is, and the frame is just everything else, the way the rest of the card looks, right? Here's the text square. So this is how they look, the cards, right? So the difference between alpha, beta, and unlimited is they look the same except unlimited has white border, right? But the cards look identical in all other respects. Uh, Arabian Nights, they still look the same, but like I said, this is the first expansion, so this has an expansion icon, right? In this case, a sword here as to tell them apart that this is from the Arabian Nights set, right? So, but the look of the cards still look very similar to Alpha Beta, right? With the black border and right, just the look of the artwork of the frame and so on, right? So it follows the same. So revised looks very similar to unlimited, right? There you go. This is unlimited. This is revised, right? They look almost the same, right? Um, right, because this is a reprint set, right? So the cards from those other sets were reprinted again, um, right? So it's allowable, right? It looks, they almost look identical, right? So it's allowable. The art looks the same. The card frame looks the same, right? So any card that looks like those within these first 2 years, from Falling Empires to Dark and all the way to Alpha Beta Unlimited, if they look like those original cards, then you're good, right? And you can get cards that were past that, right? From so for me, just looking at the research, I going into fourth edition. This is another reprint set. If you look at the cards, they look extremely similar, right? So from my understanding, fourth edition is allowable um, in Eternal Central and Atlantic rules because it still has the original art. The card frame looks the same. The frame, everything looks the same. The main difference is that the colors are more vibrant. In the older sets, they were more washed out, right? So it's more in just the quality, the vibrancy of the colors, the difference, right? But the look of the cards, they look very almost the same, right? So that's the rule of following the uh, same original art and the same um, original frame. So going back more, so I'm going to go later the in Magic sixth edition, right? So now some of these cards, Armageddon. This is not the original um, art for Armageddon. So if I wanted to play an Armageddon deck, uh, I couldn't buy cards from sixth edition. I couldn't buy Armageddon cards from sixth edition because this is not the original art, right? So it doesn't follow that rule. And and I'm not sure, right? So in the comments, if anybody has more information, you could uh, enlighten me regarding the frame. The the frame is slightly different, right? So I don't know if this will qualify as not following the frame rules, but the text is wider here. It is the same length as the art frame. In the original sets, the right is subtle, but the text frame is a little smaller than the art frame, right? So I don't know if that will qualify as not following the same frame rule, right? So for me, that's why in general I'm going as further back up to fourth edition is what I'm comfortable. That's still with in fact this right, that's the first set in '95, the uh, which was a reprint set, right? So that's as far as me personally. I'm comfortable going back to find reprints, right? Because the same cards here in Alpha balance. This could be hundreds, maybe even a couple thousand. In fact, I'm pretty sure it is in Alpha. In Alpha, basic lens are going for like 100 now. So balance, I'm sure, several $1,000s. But by following the rule of same art, same frame, I could get that same balance here. In fourth edition, these are like $5, right? So this is how the reprint rule makes it possible for uh, other people who would be interested in old school to join old school um, because it makes it a lot more feasible due to those price differences. So this balance is allowable in under the Eternal Central and Atlantic rules, right? So as you do your research and look into the decks that you want and research what cards you can and cannot use, just keep those things in mind that you have to the cards have to have the original artwork and look like the original frame, right? So later on, the frames change more and more, right? So here they still kind of look similar, right? But like I said, right? So the text and the art frame are still um, slightly different, right? So I don't know if that will count, right? Still kind of here, right? And a couple sets. Let's see here, right? Now you can see the big difference in terms of the frame, right? So even though some Swords to Polishers, this card was in the Dark Ritual, these two cards were in the original Alpha Beta Unlimited sets. These are totally different looking cards. The pictures are different, and the frame is totally different, right? So even though you can play Dark Rituals in Old School, you cannot use this particular card version of Dark Ritual or this particular version of Swords to Plowshares, right? So that's just visually so you can see the rule being put in place of it has to match the original art, the original card frame look, right? So I think going up to fourth edition is an easy way to follow those rules, right? So maybe you could go more further than that, right? In the comments, please post it if you can, right? For reprints only, right? Alliances, that's a totally different set, it has totally brand new cards. That's not allowable, right? Unless you play a different old school format. All right, so that explains the Eternal Centuries. That's the main difference there, right? And then it has slightly different, maybe banned or restricted list. Um, but we can look at that more closely in the Atlantic rules, actually. So for the Atlantic format, it's basically the same as Eternal Central, where the reprints are allowed, but it just has slightly different uh, restricted list. And here, uh, right, as you're looking at this video, please look at the just the domain names here, so you can find these websites on your own. I'll try to link these things as well in the descriptions. But here's a nice little graph explaining the differences between Eternal Central, Atlantic, and Swedish. Um, so, like I said, the main difference between Swedish and the other two is that Swedish no reprints, right? But then the other main difference would be certain cards are restricted and certain cards are not, right? So in Eternal Century, you can have 4 strip mines, you cannot have 4. They're restricted in Atlantic and Swedish. Falling Empires is allowed in Eternal Century and Atlantic. It is not allowed in Swedish. Mana Burn is active in Eternal Central and Atlantic, and it's not active in Swedish for some reason. That's also another reason why I kind of am shying away from Swedish, right? Because I remember the days of Mana Burn, right? And certain cards kind of play off of that. So I feel like it's kind of like taking away a part of the original game by taking away that rule, right? So uh, if that matters to you, uh, Eternal Central and Atlantic allow mana burn. It still exists there. Recall is restricted in EC, but we can have 4 of in the other two. Mishra's Workshop restricted in Swedish, not restricted, right? And so on. Time Vault restricted in EC, but it's allowable in the other. And Charizard restricted in Swedish, you can play 4 of in the other two, right? So there's a nice um, graph explaining what Atlantic is, and then just the differences from that to the other two, right? But that's why I'm sticking with Eternal Central and Atlantic formats, because they in general they have the reprint rule, right? So for Atlantic, you have to be careful. Like from what I'm reading, in general it has it, but it depends on the play group. Like Eternal Central, basically all Eternal Central groups have allow the reprinted sets. For the Atlantic, you have to double check, right? Depending on which one you join. From my understanding, most likely they do allow for the reprints rule, but you have to watch out, right? And then, like I mentioned in Swedish, it's not allowable at all, right? So that informs me in terms of what I can, where I can and can't play, right? So that crosses out Swedish basically out of, right, because I'm not spending a lot of money to join Old School, right? So I want to build competitive decks, but within reason, right? As I maybe delve more into it, I might be more willing to invest more and more. But this is once again keeping in mind the the most common person interested in Old School, right? The reason why they would not delve, uh, actually delve into the format is because of cost, right? So, and that's exactly the reason why I was uh, I was not tempted to join because of the cost. But upon research, and at least for me, everybody's different. I'm seeing that it is possible uh, for me uh, uh, to invest the money to join, right? So if I was willing to spend nearly $1,000 on that on my Fender guitar here, right, for that nostalgia, right, to have that thing that I have missed from before back. I'm definitely willing to spend 1,000, maybe two, uh, to delve into Old School, right? And I think for a lot of people that might be possible. And but in general, I also as I learn more about Old School, I'll be also discussing now. For the next video, I'll be discussing uh, what deck I'll be creating. Right, I'm just going to focus on one deck because the cards are expensive. Right, you got to focus and be consistent. Right, um, so that way your money is put to exactly the things that you need. But also talk about different variations of any one deck. I'll have a more budget friendly deck and just also more expensive, the most expensive perhaps that it can get. And then I'll probably be somewhere in the middle uh, because I want to stay competitive, but I have to consider cost, right? Which I think most people interested in Old School fall within the same mindset. In general, this is what my channel will be on, just for those interested in either learning, experiencing Old School through me, uh, or learning, wanting to go into it and just watching my experience to give you an idea, and then perhaps you go delve into it as well. So I'm basically starting from scratch. Like I said, I have a lot of cards, well, not too much, but definitely an okay collection. But just me going through them, uh, a lot of them are not allowable. Most of them, I would say, are not permitted within Eternal Central or Atlantic rules. Definitely not Swedish, right? So I'm basically starting from scratch, which I think is also helpful because a lot of people will probably be in a similar situation, either starting from scratch. Maybe they might have a couple cards here and there, but basically starting from the very beginning. So you're going to see my full experience in terms of me researching, deciding what deck I'm going to use, the different versions um, I might be considering, researching the prices, watching me actually purchase once I decide what deck, and then you'll see me actually going on and purchasing the cards, creating the deck physically, and then hopefully once I have it completed, even going into playing. Right, hopefully I could record myself either playing or at least give you feedback in terms of how my playing has gone. There are online groups that play through Zoom, so that's a big possibility that I'm considering as well. I'm joining different groups um, and just researching that as well. There's also some physical groups that you can um, go and meet up with physically and play, right? So uh, that's also a possibility, right? So I'm also new to Old School. I'm learning all these things. So we're going to kind of learn along together, have that full experience together. So hopefully this information and the information that you see and of the whole process uh, being followed will hopefully be of use to you, of interest to you, and or at the very least, even if you don't end up playing, uh, you can still kind of get your own nostalgic kick out of watching me go through the whole process and just reliving those moments. Hopefully, you get a kick out of it as well. So I'm gonna leave this video up to there for today. Thank you for watching.